Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you to this virtual presentation on Argentina's National Action Plan against gender-based violence in commemoration of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. According to data compiled by the United Nations, globally 35% of women have experienced physical or sexual violence by a close partner or sexual violence perpetrated by a person other than their partner, not including sexual harassment. Every day, 137 women are killed by members of their own family or close partners. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of calls to hotlines has increased fivefold in some countries as a result of rising rates of domestic violence. Restriction of movement, social isolation, and economic insecurity have increased the vulnerability of women to violence in the private sphere around the world. Gender-based violence is a major concern in Latin America and in Argentina. According to the 2020 edition of the Femicide Report of the Office of Women of the Supreme Court of Justice of Argentina, 251 direct victims of femicide were identified between January the 1st and December 31st, 2020 in Argentina. That means that there was one direct victim of femicide every 35 hours. It also reports 36 victims of linked homicides committed against one or more persons, including girls, adolescents, in order to cause suffering to a woman. When the two categories are added together, the number of fatal victims of gender-based violence in Argentina during 2020 rose to 287. In at least 84% of the cases, the direct victim of femicide had a previous link with the active subject. In 59% of the cases, there were partner or ex-partners, 10% were family members, and 15% had another type of bond. Likewise, between January and June 2021, 52,072 communications were received at the three headquarters of the 144 hotline, which provides assistance, care, containment, and advice in situations of gender violence. The Argentine government is committed to the fight against gender-based violence. Now, let me introduce from the Embassy of Argentina, that we have the pleasure to host this virtual meeting, the Deputy Director of the Women's Office of the Argentine Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Trade and Worship, Mrs. Soledad Capone. We'll go through the main actions adopted by Argentina against gender-based violence.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to be part of this special event in Lebanon to commemorate the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls. It is a great honor to be here with you today in representation of the Division of Women and Gender Issues of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Argentina. Argentina has a strong commitment to the advancement of gender equality and the promotion of women's rights. In recent years, our country has made outstanding progress in developing a legal framework and public policies to promote gender equality and to eliminate gender-based violence and all forms of discrimination. The creation of the Ministry of Women, Gender and Diversity in December 2019 prioritized the institutional framework of gender issues at the highest level of the structure of the national executive branch, with the aim of ensuring the continuity and deepening of public policies with a gender approach, promoting the advancement of concrete actions on gender equality. To this end, in August 2020, the National Cabinet for the Mainstreaming of Gender Policies was created. Its main purpose is to guarantee the incorporation of the gender perspective in the design, implementation, and evaluation of all national public policies. This means that all national ministries and agencies of the National Public Administration actively participate in this cabinet, and most of them have created specialized divisions on gender issues, and all of them have designated focal points on gender matters. Argentina has two major national action plans. One is the National Action Plan Against Gender-Based Violence, which was adopted in 2020, and the National Plan for Equality and Diversity, adopted in 2021. The first one acknowledges the need to change the paradigm of the individual approach to situations of gender-based violence and move towards the development of a comprehensive approach, which involves creating subjective and material conditions for victims of gender-based violence to be able to build a self-sufficient life project. The 2021-2023 Federal Plan for Equality and Diversity is to serve as a tool for transforming structural factors that support and reproduce gender-based inequalities. In addition, as part of the National Cabinet for the Mainstreaming of Gender Policies, each ministry has presented its own gender mainstreaming internal working plan. As an example, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Trade and Worship took this opportunity for mainstreaming the gender perspective in the fields such as international trade and as a chance to propose reaching parity in the country's representation in meetings and missions abroad as a general objective. It also includes actions that involve the elaboration of guidelines and the corresponding training in gender issues to all personnel, among other activities. One of the key tools for gender mainstreaming in the public sector is the implementation of the Micaela Law that was enacted in 2019. This law establishes mandatory education and training on gender issues in general and on the elimination of violence against women and girls in particular. For all people who work in the public sector at all levels, including high-ranking officials of the executive, judicial, and legislative branches. Due to the legitimacy achieved by the Micaela Law, all Argentine provinces have law, and there is a growing demand from other non-state sectors to implement it, which clearly shows the need and urgency of training in gender perspective. Along with other awareness-raising instances that are being developed within the public sphere, it seeks to make gender inequalities visible, dismantle gender roles and stereotypes, and promote respect for diversity. The ultimate goal is to prevent and eradicate discrimination and gender-based violence. It is worth highlighting a historical milestone in the implementation of the Micaela Law. On January 10, 2020, the President of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, together with his cabinet of ministers and secretaries of state, received training on the Micaela Law in a clear manifestation of the importance that the current administration gives to the incorporation of the gender perspective in the public sector. This founding scene began a series of awareness-raising instances designed to train the highest-ranking authorities in order to generate critical reviews of state practices and interventions, integrating the gender perspective in management. It focuses on the important and urgent need that those in power plan, implement, and evaluate public policies from a gender perspective. I cannot finish my presentation without mentioning about the negative impact the COVID-19 pandemic has had on women and girls. The COVID-19 pandemic has made the structural inequalities of our societies visible as never before, and has exacerbated the disproportionate barriers women and girls continue to face, especially the increased levels of gender-based violence and the burden of unpaid care and domestic work, which directly affects women's possibilities of entering and staying in the labor market and developing a professional career, and in the end, their economic autonomy. Faced with this situation, Argentina has acknowledged the need for strong public policies aimed at reinforcing assistance to women and girls victims of gender-based violence and at promoting an equitable division of unpaid care and domestic work, access to quality care services, and the reconciliation of work and family life. The government is currently working on establishing a comprehensive care system in order to guarantee the right to care, overcome the sexual division of labor and its impact in the reproduction of gender inequalities and promoting a fair and equitable social organization of care. In the 48th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council, Argentina presented, together with Mexico, an international statement about the importance of care in our societies. This is intended to be the first step to strengthen the international legal framework in this matter that can guarantee the right to care, to be careful, and to self-care, with the ultimate aim of achieving a fair and equitable distribution of care work, and thus dismantling the structural basis of gender inequality. The commemoration of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls reminds us we all have a role to play to achieve societies free from violence. Ending violence against women and girls is possible with a comprehensive approach that tackles the root causes, transforms harmful social norms, provides services for survivors, and ends impunity. In Argentina, we believe that it is necessary to adopt strong public policies aimed at eradicating patterns of structural inequalities and to reorganize the social life of our people so that we can achieve fairer and more egalitarian human relations. We are convinced that this is the way forward so as to leave no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation. Now, as Ambassador of Argentina to Lebanon, I have the pleasure to introduce Mrs. Claudine Aoun, President of the National Commission for Lebanese Women. Mrs. Aoun is also the head of the Supreme Council of Arab Women Organization for the period 2019-2021. She was appointed as President of the National Commission for Lebanese Women in 2017, where she works on empowering Lebanese women, protecting their rights, as well as ensuring their effective participation in society. At the said commission, she initiated as well as considerable number of important actions and plans, including the adoption by the Lebanese government of the UN Resolution 1325 Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, Drugs Prevention Action and Laws, Gender Equality Advocacy. Mrs. Aoun, it's a pleasure to have you with us this morning. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So, okay, are you hearing me? Okay, thank you. Okay. Your Excellency, Ambassador Mauricio Alice, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to be with you here today. 30 years ago, activists against gender-based violence realized that this scourge was spreading worldwide and required concerted efforts to beat it. In 1991, activists at the inaugural Women's Global Leadership Institute launched the first 16 days campaign against gender-based violence. But it wasn't before the year 2000 that the United Nations Security Council voted in favor of Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. This landmark resolution would define in clear terms the depths of suffering inflicted on women by wars. Yet, even today, we know how difficult it is for women to beat the odds of the violence whirlwind if we do not, as governments and societies, give them the right legal and social tools. Lebanon is no exception. After painful and sometimes deadly incidents, combating gender-based violence became our priority. It gave a clear orientation for our work as national machinery. From there on, the National Commission for Lebanese Women, in cooperation with the public sector and the civil society, and with the support of international organizations and institutions, sought to build legal and institutional frameworks to prevent acts of violence against women, to give women the protection they need, to facilitate and simplify their access to justice. The Commission has put in place a violence barometer program in Lebanon to understand the evolution of public opinion on issues related to GBV. This implies approaching the topic from different aspects and angles. GBV is also at the forefront of our Resolution 1325 National Action Plan. With the assistance of our local and international partners, we are creating interventions to help combat this scourge. The existing working groups within the framework of implementing the National Action Plan for Resolution 1325 continue to seek to adopt greater legal protection for victims of human trafficking and adopt standard comprehensive operating procedures in this matter. On another note, the National Commission is also working with other working groups implementing the 1325 Action Plan to adopt a law setting at 18 the minimum age for marriage and to increase women's participation in decision-making by adopting a women's quota in the legislation of parliamentary and municipal elections and on the boards of directors of joint stock companies. In parallel, we developed a lexicon to unify the concepts related to dealing with cases of gender-based violence. On the ground, we worked with the Ministry of Social Affairs on developing standards that need to be met by shelters designated to receive battered women. NCRW is also carrying out awareness campaigns on the dangers of cyber extortion crimes and building campaigns to inform the public on the law criminalizing sexual harassment approved by the Parliament late last year. Also, in cooperation with the Ministry of Social Affairs, NCRW aims to develop health and social services for victims of gender-based violence in the designated regional service centers affiliated with the ministry. And because GBV is not a woman's problem, but a wider social predicament, we are campaigning relentlessly to raise awareness and knowledge among the general public, young men and women about gender issues. Ladies and gentlemen, for a woman to break off the cycle of violence, she needs to be empowered and enfranchised. We had this in mind when we introduced an amendment to the law on the protection of women and family members from domestic violence. We developed legal protections for women and emphasized the necessity of establishing a fund to help women victims of violence. Ladies and gentlemen, I have read with great interest about the experience taking place in Argentina to combat gender-based violence and the national plan adopted for this purpose. I was drawn to the fact that in your action plan, all state agencies are committed within the framework of action to coordinate the various programs and measures adopted to prevent and protect gender-based violence. Indeed, building a context and momentum for social awareness and the right legislative and institutional environment that rejects this type of violence and preparing the premise for broad participation in those efforts are essential factors for uprooting this scourge from society. I applaud the efforts made in Argentina and Lebanon to succeed in achieving this goal. No single woman has to face her demons alone. We still have some road to take, but we will get there eventually. Muchas gracias. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Claudine Aoun, for your important remarks, for the valuable information you shared with us, and for participating this morning today, which also is a way to express the continuous cooperation between Argentina and Lebanon. And again, thank you for your work, your participation, and the work of the Commission that you chair. Thank you very much. Now, if you allow me to, I would like to introduce the main initiatives that are contained in the National Action Plan against Gender-Based Violence for the years 2022, adopted by Argentina, whose details I would like to introduce in the following presentations. Argentina has a robust legislative framework to deal with violence against women. On 2009, a law on comprehensive protection to prevent, punish, and eradicate violence against women in the areas where they develop interpersonal relationships was enacted, which constitutes a fundamental tool in the fight against gender-based violence. The law establishes different types of violence and its modalities. That is, the ways in which the different types of violence against women take place in different areas. This legislation was further developed in 2019, incorporating other forms of violence. Argentine legislation acknowledges the different types of forms that gender-based violence can take place. Argentine legislation identifies 6 types of gender-based violence. Physical violence used against a person's body, producing physical pain, injury, or risk of producing it, and any form of abuse that affects their physical integrity. Psychological violence causes emotional damage and decreased self-esteem, impairing and disturbing the full personal development, or seeking to degrade or control the actions, behaviors, beliefs, and decisions through threats, harassment, restraint, humiliation, disgrace, discredit, manipulation, isolation. Sexual violence is as any action that implies violation in all its forms of the right of women to voluntarily decide about their sexual or reproductive life through threats, coercion, use of force, or intimidation, including rape within marriage or other related relationships or kinships, as well as forced prostitution, exploitation, slavery, harassment, sexual abuse, and women trafficking. Economic violence directed at causing an impairment in the economic or patrimonial resources of women through altering the possession or ownership of their assets. The loss, theft, destruction of objects, work instruments, personal documents, and other assets. The limitation of the economic resources destined to satisfy their needs or deprivation of the indispensable means of living a dignified kind of life. The limitation or control of their income, as well as receiving a lower salary for the same task within the same workplace. Symbolic violence, presented through stereotype patterns, messages, values, icons, or signs that transmit and reproduce domination, inequality, and discrimination in social relationships, naturalizing the subordination of women in society. And finally, political violence, aimed at undermining, preventing, obstructing, or restricting women's political participation, violating the right to a political life free of violence or the right to participate in public and political affairs under equal conditions with men. Along with the types of violence, Argentina legislation defines the forms of gender-based violence. That is the way in which the types of gender-based violence manifest themselves in different environments. 8 forms of gender-based violence are especially highlighted. Institutional violence carried out by members of the public official whose purpose is to delay, obstruct, or prevent women from having access to public policies and exercising their rights as recognized by the law. This includes political parties, unions, business, sports, and civil society organizations. Workplace violence, the one which discriminates against women in public or private work spheres and hinders their access to employment, hiring, promotion, stability, etc. Demanding requirements on material status, maternity, age, physical appearance, or carrying out a pregnancy test also constitutes violence against women. It also includes systematic psychological harassment of women in order to achieve her exclusion from work. Violence against reproductive freedom, that which violates the right of women to freely and responsibly decide the number of pregnancies or the interval between births. Obstetric violence, that which is carried out by health personnel or the body and reproductive processes of women, expressed, for instance, in dehumanized treatment and the abuse of medicalization. Media violence, which is the publication or dissemination of stereotyped messages and images through any mass media, which directly or indirectly promotes the exploitation of women or their images, insults, defamations, discriminates, dishonors, humiliates, or violates the dignity of women, as well as the use of women, adolescents, and girls in pornographic messages and images, legitimizing unequal treatment or constructing sociocultural patterns that reproduce inequality or generators of violence against women. violence in public spaces, exercised against women by one or more people in public places or with public access, such as means of transport or shopping centers, through conduct of verbal or non-verbal expressions with sexual connotations that affect or damage their dignity, integrity, freedom, free movement, or permanence, and or create a hostile or offensive environment. Public political violence, which based on gender reasons, mediating intimidation, harassment, disgrace, discredit, persecution, harassment, and or threats, prevents or limits the development of political life or access to political rights and duties. And finally, domestic violence exercised against women by a member of the family group, regardless of the physical space where it occurs, that damages the dignity, the well-being, physical, psychological, sexual, economic, or patrimonial integrity, freedom, including reproductive freedom, and the right to full development of women. As mentioned previously, gender-based violence is a matter of great concern in Argentina, and the Argentine government has made the eradication of gender-based violence one of its main priorities. Since the introduction of the Law on Comprehensive Protection of 2009, Argentina has issued 2 public policy documents in that regard for the period of 2014-2016 and of 2017-2019. The latter came to an end in the month of December 2019, coinciding with the start of the current government's administration. Soon after taking office in December 2019, the new government created the Ministry of Women, Genders, and Diversity. This ministry has the responsibility of designing, implementing, and evaluating national public policies to prevent and eradicate gender-based violence and to assist in a comprehensive way those persons who are subject to violence. In order to do so, the ministry set in motion a participative and federal process for the creation of a nationwide policy against gender-based violence. After months of debates, seminars, and meetings all over Argentina, and after a fruitful exchange of ideas and points of view between the members of the national, provincial, and the civil society, in June 2020, the Ministry of Women, Genders, and Diversity presented its National Action Plan for the upcoming 2 years. What makes this plan different from the previous ones? This plan represents a shift in the process by which public policy on gender-based violence was conceived in Argentina, moving from a model focused on emergency care to one that aims at modifying the structural conditions of inequality on which violence is built. It also represents an innovation in the process of creation. The National Action Plan is the result of a federal participative, cross-cutting, and territorial approach to policymaking that involved the national government, local governments, the civil society, and members of the judiciary. 3,406 people were involved in the consultation process, and more than 1,600 proposals were received. This plan aims at dealing with gender-based violence in a holistic manner, tackling the structural causes that originate it. Through the implementation of its plan, Argentina seeks to establish a national policy for the prevention of gender-based violence, a national policy of assistance to people in situations of gender-based violence, a national policy for the protection of people in situations of gender-based violence, a national policy for strengthening access to justice for people in situations of gender-based violence. In order to achieve this, the plan includes more than 100 short-term, middle-term, and long-term actions conceived across the entire national public administration, aimed at facilitating access to rights and providing tools so that women can build life projects free of violence. Among these initiatives, we can highlight the Argentina United Against Gender-Based Violence campaign aimed at raising awareness that invites critical reflection on the stereotypes, mandates, and social cultural patterns that shape identities and relationships between genders and constitute the matrix on which gender-based violence is reproduced and legitimized. Since it has been launched, nationwide outreach campaigns were carried out in traditional media and social networks, awareness meetings and workshops were held, and guidelines were developed for the identification and detection of situations of gender-based violence. Integrated system for cases of gender-based violence. Having reliable and updated information is key to designing and implementing policy. This is a tool aimed at preparing systematized data and statistical information with a federal scope. It is the first national tool for systematizing information in cases of gender-based violence. And as of now, 19 Argentine provinces are cooperating with this system. The accompanying program, or Programa Acompañar, to provide economic assistance and psychosocial support to people in situations of gender-based violence. This program is already available all across Argentina, and more than 21,000 people suffering from gender-based violence have access to it. Programa Potenciar Trabajo, or Empowering Work Program, aimed at promoting social inclusion and progressive improvement of the income of people suffering from gender-based violence with a view to achieve their economic autonomy. This program has benefited more than 8,200 people between May 2020 and June 2021. Modernization and optimization of the gender-based violence hotline, strengthening the specialized human resources in this area, the expansion of services channels, and the optimization of quality and levels of accessibility through a digital app with information on institutions that can provide assistance. Between June 2020 and July 2021, the 144 hotline assisted more than 115,000 people, particularly women. Communication channels were expanded through the first WhatsApp system created in Latin America, with an exclusive email address, and technological improvements were made so that the hotline could assist more people simultaneously. This plan represents the Argentine government's commitment to the elimination of gender-based violence. Its new approach on dealing with the causes of gender-based violence, while reinforcing the assistance provided to the victims and their families, is a big step in the right direction towards the fulfillment of our main objective, which is to provide women with a violence-free environment so that they can freely develop their life projects. I would like to, before concluding this seminar, to give the occasion to the President of the National Commission of Lebanese Women to make a presentation on their campaign to raise awareness on cyber extortion and sexual harassment. The floor is yours.
ما طلع الشغل بإيدي قد ما عم فكر فيكي. طيب معقول صدق جمعة ووعدتيني بالصور؟ يعني ما بتحبيني بيب؟
حياتي أكيد بدي أشوفهم لأهلك ولو
بشو بحلف لك إن حياتي كلها إلك.
يسلم لي الجمال أنا. لك حياتي هلا صار معي كل صورك، إذا ما بتبعتي لي 3 مليون رح أفضحك قدام الكل. كبسة تصير فيها خرب لك حياتك.
الابتزاز الإلكتروني جريمة. بلغك والأمن الداخلي. الهيئة الوطنية لشؤون المرأة اللبنانية. هيدا الخوف بتعيشه كل مرة وبنت خلال حياتها، بس هلأ صار في قانون بيحمينا. القانون 205 على 2020 يرمي إلى تجريم التحرش الجنسي وتأهيل ضحاياه. الهيئة الوطنية لشؤون المرأة اللبنانية.
Thank you for this presentation. I don't know if Mrs. Aoun would like to make a final comment, a final word before we close this seminar.
Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you for the invitation, Your Excellency. And really, I appreciate you share with us the whole National Action Plan. It's really interesting and well done. You covered all the topics and the access, so congratulations.
Thank you very much. As I said before, thank you for your participation, your important remarks, the valuable information you provided and shared with us this morning on the work of your commission. And let me, before concluding this participation, to mention that this seminar, these presentations will be entirely available on the Embassy YouTube channel. We will share the link with all the participants, and we'll also share it on our embassy's website. Thank you all this morning for being here. Thank you. And I hope we will continue working together, tackling very sensitive issues that are the basis of our common interest and continuous bilateral work. Thank you.